Well, let me begin by introducing us again. My name is Jean Hunter. I've served as a CAPCOM, as a food study lead, as the crew selection lead in past years, and right now I'm a member and the head of the remote science team. With me on the podium are Dr. Cheryl Bishop, who is professor of biostatistics at University of Texas Medical Branch in Galveston. She is a member of an MDRS crew back in 2005, and she now serves as science director of MDRS. Our third panelist is Jamie Ginnett, who's an exercise physiologist at NASA JSC. She also has her own exercise consulting business. She has served as a CAPCOM and also as a crew commander. So you can see we have a number of different viewpoints here on operation of the MDRS. I'd like to start by thanking the people that couldn't be here that I would have liked to have on the panel. Peter Detterline from the astronomy team, who actually gave us some materials. Judd Reed, head of engineering projects, who was instrumental in bringing new suits to MDRS. Chuck Killian, the CAPCOM coordinator, and Shannon Rupert, the mission director. So how many of you are familiar with MDRS? Okay, well that's very good. How many of you have been to MDRS? Okay, a lot of you at the back. So for those of you who have been to MDRS or are familiar, these next few slides may be a little bit of a rehearsal, but I hope you'll still learn something.
Hello everyone. I'm excited to be here. This was certainly a last minute thing for me. Thank you, Dr. Hunter, for asking me to participate in the conference this year. So as Dr. Hunter mentioned, I was recently commander of Crew 138 for this most recent field season, 2013-2014, and it was quite the adventure. I enjoyed myself, and I had the best crew that anyone could ever hope to have, and I know that you probably hear that often, especially from commanders of various types of missions like this, but it's the honest truth. And so the running joke, according to Shannon Rupert, who is the director of Mars Desert Research Station, and unfortunately couldn't be here for the conference this year, said that our crew's nickname was Potluck. And the reason we were referred to as Potluck is because we didn't know each other before we arrived at MDRS. So they weren't really sure. They just took a chance on us. They weren't sure how our crew was going to shake out in the end. I like to think that we had a pretty successful mission, and I formed friendships with 5 other people that I still maintain to this day, and probably will forever, because if you've never been to Mars Desert Research Station, or if you have been, you know it can be quite the bonding experience. So we'll go ahead and review a few things about the habitat for those of you who aren't as familiar with the HAB. This is an overall shot of the HAB, and you can see it kind of reminds me of SpongeBob SquarePants, if you're familiar with this house, just because of the portals up there at the very top. So it's kind of cool. And I believe this is a picture, and you can see Jean Dr. Hunter looking out from one of our sim suits there. I believe this is the World Space Week mission. That's right. Photo. And gotcha. So this is what MDRS looks like from an engineering or architectural schematic. This is the interior floor plan. We don't have any interior shots, actual photos, so just review real quickly. The overall habitat is 8-meter diameter Mars analog habitat, and to be honest with you, I've seen quite a few and am involved to a certain extent with a variety of the Mars analog missions that we have ongoing today. So we have one at JSC, which is referred to as the Hera mission, and its habitat is much smaller compared to Mars Desert Research Station. And then there's, of course, the High Seas mission that's over in Hawaii that Dr. Hunter is also involved with. The MDRS sits in the southern Utah desert in the region known as the San Rafael Swell region. It's pretty much off the electrical grid, so there are future plans, I believe, to make the habitat a little more self-sufficient. We have propane for heating. Thankfully, during my mission, by the time I arrived, it was around March the 15th, and it was until the end of March. We didn't have to use the heater as much as some of the earlier crews. which I was very thankful for. So I think that the mission that I was a part of was actually at a good time during the season. I wouldn't want to go much later because it gets too hot, and I definitely wouldn't want to go much earlier in the season because of the cold weather. I like things to be pretty constant. The water is actually brought in by truck, if you guys aren't familiar with that. So that's one of the things that's a challenge for the crew. Not only are we out there and we're having to deal with some of the stressors of being pretty much removed and in a confined space habitat, which brings its own set of stressors, and that's something of interest, especially for some of us life sciences researchers. But we also have to learn to essentially survive out there, and the reason is because we're resource limited. And they do that on purpose, because how else are you going to train crews to survive in extreme or hostile environments, especially if it's an off-planet environment? The outbuildings, and this is the entire campus, you can see that we have the hab, we have the green hab, which we'll talk more about in just a bit. There's a tunnel that's actually under construction. The reason there's a tunnel from the hab to the green hab is because if we were really on Mars, we would not go outside the habitat, right? Bad things will happen. I can tell you that from a life sciences standpoint. So at the moment, if we go outside the habitat, we have to wear our swimsuits because we are in simulation. So that's also one of the defining features of Mars as a research station. And the research that is conducted there is that all crews enter what we call simulation. So we really act as though we are living on Mars for the duration of the mission, because it is one big experiment. We also have an observatory. We'll definitely talk more about that. It's a fantastic resource. And then we have a generator shack that's just out of view. You can't see that. And there's a few other things. You can see that we have to have communication. So there's a satellite hanging out there. There's additional things that also weren't in the photo. We have our rovers. Our rovers are ATVs. So we have a set of 4 of those. I believe there are at times 5, but while my crew was there, we had 4. So we use those for EVAs, or extravehicular activity, that is quite a distance away from the hab. So we have a 100-meter radius that we consider the no-fly zone around the habitat. So anything within that 100-meter radius, you're expected to have just an ambulatory EVA. In other words, you don't need to use the rovers or the ATVs for such a short distance. But the rovers do come in handy, especially if you're going to deploy various types of field experiments and if you're going to venture far away from the hab. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Dr. Hunter.
Actually, I'm going to turn it over to Cheryl to talk about the goals and some of our changes in policies and in the way we manage science.
All right, so those of you who've been to MDRS previously know that there is a process by which you apply, by which you submitted your research proposals, by which those proposals were reviewed and approved or vetted, and then a process by which you carried out that science. And we've been working to improve that process. It has varied greatly over the years. I was a part of a crew there in 2005 in which we were comparing a homogeneous all-women's team to a previous team of mine that was all men. And the proposal process was far more relaxed and informal because in order to be accepted among the scientific community, questions about scientific integrity and protocols come up. We've been moving MDRS in the direction of improving and tightening those regulations and attention to those kinds of details. It is a work in progress, and each year we make improvements, and part of that is in order to move the application process and the review of the science proposals ahead far enough for us to give timely response back to the crews. We've also had to adjust the timing of when these applications were presented or submitted. So we now have gone to a 2-step process by which we have the crews are applying and then submitting very early on their science proposals. We are trying to provide increased documentation about what is expected in those science proposals by characterizing the limitations that they're going to be faced in MDRS, and also certain other aspects. For instance, in life sciences, in order to do any human life science research in MDRS, our requirement now is that you have to go through an approved institutional review at some institution, because we don't have the capability to provide that review. If any of those of you who have been involved in life science research knows that any kind of IRB review anywhere takes more time than what you ever expected it would take. So therefore, in order to give crews enough time to respond to these new expectations and requirements on part of the Mars Society, is that we have to get the applications in sooner, and then we as the remote science team have to give back feedback in a timely manner in order for them to be able to move forward on this. So we have been working, there's two documents that those of you may be familiar with. There's a proposal research form, we call it the PRIF. It's a proposal information research form. And then there's a full form. We use the PRF, the abbreviated form, initially for applicants to give us what they expect their study project is going to be. And we have expanded this in order to allow applicants to tell us whether they have the skill set in order to do a particular science project. What we have found is that we have many times people apply and they would like to do a project on X, but they don't have the background or the expertise or even the support or mentoring in order to actually conduct that piece of research. In those particular cases, we're asking for that information up front. We have canned projects that we can suggest so that individuals can come there and get a meaningful experience, even if they may not have expertise in life sciences or geology or astronomy and those kinds of things. We have projects that they can participate in which they can then gain the experience as well as contribute to that body of science. You've got to remember that our remote science support team are individuals that are volunteering from all over the world. They are not usually resident at MDRS or anywhere close, so there is a turnaround period in which we can contact those domain experts and have them give feedback and guidance and mentoring. So we're trying to collect more information up front so that we can help applicants do a better job of conducting meaningful science and having meaningful experiences, and that means we have to be a little bit systematic. Now, this particular form went through revision after revision after revision. Each year it has changed, it has improved as we identified gaps. We finally have come to an approved form, at least for the moment. We have put it online so that individuals can go online and fill it out. That allows us to do nice, fancy things like skip logic, where if you're saying you're going to do a geology project, you do not have to wade through the 3 pages of questions about human research or the things on the greenhouse. So it will skip you to the applicable and relevant portions of that proposal and ask you specific questions. And we've tried to get our remote science experts for each one of those domains to give us exactly what they need to know in order to give meaningful feedback about a proposal, either to identify the problems with the proposal, to suggest changes to the proposal so that it can be done in MDRS, or to essentially say this proposal is not one that we can approve. And I point that out because there are many things, for instance, that I can get through my institutional review board, but that literally cannot be done at the Mars Desert Research Facility. We have limited storage space, so I can't take unlimited biological samples. We have limited power, so you can't bring a robot that needs to be charged up, every day at the end of the day. We have limited communication capabilities, so you can't come and expect to do an online, real-time telemedicine experiment in which you need to use a lot of bandwidth. So the realities of MDRS sometimes contradict what can be approved in any other circumstance. And that's part of the education process that we're hoping to communicate out to those individuals who are interested in coming to MDRS. Tab changes. I think we need to go back to this is a little bit of this, a little bit of that.
Okay. besides updating our policies and procedures and our science review process, there have also been some major upgrades to the HAB. They started actually in 2011 and are continuing. So this past year, one of the things that we did was to upgrade we did a paint job on the HAB here, and we took down the old doors with their historical accumulation of crew patches because it was getting out of hand, and gave it a new paint job here. We also upgraded the lab. Every year we put in something new. This year it was a brand new microbiology incubator that was used by several of the crews during their rotations. Next year we hope to have a little autoclave in there. And we also upgraded the suits and helmets. So the original suits, you'll see pictures of them later, were they were dated from the original MDRS opening in 2002. They were getting old, they were falling apart, and so we needed something better and also something easier to wear. So we upgraded to a pack system based on a military pack called Molly, and a pack, the pack itself, not the backpack frame here, but the pack itself is actually a plastic box. Inside are batteries and fans and so forth to bring air into the helmet. And the helmets used to be made out of a combination of a half sphere of acrylic and a wastebasket top. And you can't get those wastebasket tops anymore. So we had to go to a new method, and these 14 to 16 inch spheres are being used a lot by cosplay enthusiasts, people who go to Comic-Con dressed as the Dead Mouse and other comic characters. So these were made by the NorCal chapter of MDRS. We also have new coveralls, which are bright orange for visibility in the field. It's a safety thing. Another thing we've done is the Artist in Residence program. While most MDRS crews are scientists and engineers, artists also represent an important population for space advocacy. 5 artists crewed at MDRS this past year, up from 2 in the previous year. And all of them have used their experience in the crew as inspiration for new works of visual art and literature that bring the message of human space exploration to a wider audience than scientists and engineers can reach on their own. Let me say a few words also about the telescope here. And I'm going to a set of slides that were furnished by Peter Detterline, who is the head of the astronomy team. He wasn't able to attend, but he wanted you to know about the changes that have been made to the Musk Observatory and how to go about using the observatory if you're a crew member. So this is a time-lapse photo, not taken from the observatory looking back towards MDRS. And I think you know what direction it's pointing? There we go. Okay. So the Musk Observatory at MDRS houses a 14-inch Celestron telescope on a high-precision computerized go-to mount. This means that you can tell the telescope what to look at in the sky, and it will automatically go there and stay there. It's located under some of the darkest skies in the continental U.S., making this a really amazing facility for stargazing. I haven't used the telescope myself, but I've used binoculars out there, and it's just absolutely amazing. All of the images in this segment were taken at the observatory. Crew members who want to use the observatory can register as a visual observer and take some training. And as visual observers, they can use the observatory to view various objects in the night sky, either using the observatory's eyepieces or their own. For more advanced crew members can do imaging using the CCD camera and laptop. This can be done either at the observatory or remotely from the HAB, which is great for those real cold winter nights. So, crew members are also encouraged to bring their own cameras and equipment to use at the facility. Crew members who want to use a facility from either the HAB or the observatory have to submit a research proposal and pass an online training. The link to the training can be found on the MDRS website. This past summer, during the astronomy refit mission, we solved 3 major concerns with the facility, the major one having to do with imaging. This past season, we've had better imaging than in the past with fewer problems. However, exposures over a minute in length could not be achieved without star trailing. All of these images were taken during the 2013-2014 season by crew members, and they're all short duration photos. Now we can take longer exposures thanks to a new auto guider. This camera attached to a small refractor makes tiny movements to the mount to compensate for the Earth's movement and even movements of the mount. The result is that we can now take images up to 10 minutes in length. For example, the central image on this page, which is the M13 globular cluster. The inset is a picture of the same object, a 30-second exposure taken this season before. Okay. Here's the Eagle Nebula. This was a single 8-minute exposure taken with the one-shot color CCD camera. And this is the Ring Nebula. This was a compilation of several images stacked on a laptop. Notice a white dwarf at the center of the ring. The second concern was having the dome move automatically with the telescope. This worked beautifully now, but it does have one slight issue. If this telescope is placed too far to the side, that is observing very low in the southeast, southwest, northeast, or northwest, the autoguider can't clear the dome even though the telescope can. And they're working on this in the training. Once the dome and telescope sync was achieved, the last concern was being able to image from the HAB itself without having to go out to the observatory. You have to go out to the observatory to set things up, but after that, you can go back into the one habitat and do everything from there. There's a laptop and ranger in the HAB, and it controls 4 devices: the camera, the autoguider, the telescope, and the dome, with amazing speed. So even at a distance of 150 feet, you can do this. You can do pretty much anything you need to do without an internet connection. Unfortunately, it only controls 4 devices, so that if you want to focus, you have to go out to the observatory. Future improvements include being able to focus from the HAB. We'd also like to install a Celestron star sense, which will align by itself, overriding the traditional 2-star alignment procedure. Peter's also looking at a device that can hold your smartphone up to the camera, so you can get smartphone camera shots. This will be kept with the visual astronomy box and can be signed out along with the other observation equipment. The tunnel to the observatory provides a, quote, safe and in-sim corridor for travel, even in the dark. It has been started but not completed, and it will be completed later this summer. Thanks to crew member Joseph Jessup, we now also have a working radio telescope at the HAB, and this is a picture of it. It had to be temporarily dismantled to put up the tunnel, but there are plans to put it back in a new location. We still have no published research from the observatory. The problem is that a 2-week mission is really not long enough to learn the system and start fresh on a new project. One university's been working with Peter to coordinate research over a number of teams to do photometry. They will be training their students on the CCD camera and sending them out in multiple missions to achieve research over the course of an entire season. And this cooperative long-term research is really the way we want to go. Our camera is not research grade, it's meant for taking great pictures, but it would be too expensive to keep up with advances in research grade CCD cameras, so we rely on collaborators to provide that last link in the research chain. So if you, we plan on having astronomy refit crews working at MDRS each summer. If you're interested in collaborating on this or helping with the astronomy refit this coming late summer and fall, Peter would love to hear from you. And now this is morning twilight at the station. The Musk Observatory is now in better shape than it has ever been. So whether you're a casual observer of the night or an astrophotographer or research astronomer, we have a place for you at MDRS. So now we want to go to the what we've been doing at MDRS during the season. So these are the 12 crew patches from the 11 crews that were out there. Crew 139 had 2 patches because they had 2 1-week crews. Okay. But before that, I'm going to talk about our major outreach program, which is the University Rover Challenge, which happens after the major season. It happens always the weekend after Memorial Day, out at the Hab. It's run by Mars Society member Kevin Sloan, who's run it for several years. This year, 31 teams applied, of which 23 brought rovers to the arena outside MDRS. This was the largest number of contestants ever. Despite the tightly packed schedule, the competition went smoothly, putting rovers through their paces in events such as the equipment servicing task, here where the rover has to manipulate valves to fill a balloon, and a transit task where it goes over the gullies and the rocks of the desert, which form a natural obstacle course. Here's the team from Michigan, University of Michigan, go Wolverines, putting together the M rover, and this is the University of Toronto rover approaching the equipment servicing task. Now we've had a number of notable science projects, and I'll turn this over to Cheryl to give you a very quick tour through some of the ones that we found most notable and visually appealing.
All right, so science projects. We had over 100 science and engineering projects were brought to MDRS last season, and here are a few of the most notable. A member of one of the rover teams brought a UV spectrometer designed for the rover to test on MDRS rocks. The young physician specializing in space medicine brought a training mannequin and trained fellow crew members on anesthesia projects. Crew 135 projects range from investigating the structural properties of the hat to setting up LED lights for crop growth in the green hat. The geologists of Crew 136 used fluorescent lighting to identify particular rocks and minerals associated with prior water exposure, while 2 of his teammates launched a tethered balloon carrying weather data sensors. Crew 137 investigated different sorts of disinfectants for cleaning a dusty surface, heavily used by humans, and Crews 138 through 139 both brought quadcopters to the Hab and used them for aerial reconnaissance and map making. MDRS also hosted notable engineering projects, a UV blocking shade cloth for the green Hab used in the late spring and summer, and an alternative to the Mars rover, the Mars bicycle, which folds back up into a backpack. So it was a multifunctional piece of equipment. Many fascinating projects didn't make for great images. They're listed here. In all, the crew science was a great success for the season, and we look forward to what comes up in the coming years.
Let's go on to recap the season's triumphs, challenges, lessons learned, and what's going on for future years. Well, we had a number of really great triumphs for the year, and it may seem a little odd to sort of lead with media coverage, but that was really a triumph for MDRS because the kind of media coverage we've been getting enables us to attract more interest, better crews, donations, and to put MDRS and space exploration out in front of many, many people. Every change to the HABS equipment and each change in the procedures is also an experiment. Besides the media coverage, these are some things that worked out particularly well. We had a new crew overlap policy. You saw the calendar earlier in the presentation. Here we have insisted that crews that come in will spend overnight in the HAB with the leaving crew. This gives them an opportunity to learn the HAB in more depth and to go through an evening of reportage procedures, even if they are delayed in arriving at the habitat due to, say, travel delays. As Cheryl explained, we've had much improved crew science this year, including an increase in field science and field testing. Part of this is because we now offer scholarship for field scientists and field engineers. Part of it is the proposal review process, which Cheryl championed and headed up. Finally, greenhouse operations were a big success this year, and here are three shots from the greenhouse. You can see that we use a number of different ways to grow plants. We grew them in pots, we grew them in window boxes, we grew them in flats, and this is the harvest of carrots at the end of the season. There are so many left that the last crew could barely eat them all. That's a very good thing. Part of the success here was due to the supplemental lighting installed by Lucy Poulet in crew, I'm going to get this wrong, 135 perhaps. And to Nick Orenstein's efforts in setting up the greenhouse as a growth facility in crew 132. We also had the season had also its share of challenges. We had 2 serious ATV accidents that could have been much worse. We had a few piping problems, and most of the crews objected to our requirement to stay an extra day to train a new crew at the end of their mission. And they objected almost in proportion to how much they appreciated being trained by the earlier crew at the beginning of their own rotation. We also erred in allowing some of the rules and procedures at the station to evolve during the mission. This confused both the crews and the CAPCOMs. And I think if you want to ask some questions about that, Jamie is the real expert on that because she served in both in both positions. So next year, what are we going to do for next year? Well, next year is a little bit problematic for crew selection because we're going to have to incorporate 3 FMARS crews into the season, so they will be training along with the regular crews. We plan to correct the problems with the new helmets and build out a larger number of new helmets and backpacks, gradually replacing the old helmets and backpacks. There will be, as there are every year, more revisions to the habitat, water supply, and sewage removal system. And finally, we're going to get a treat up there in the kitchen. This is a shot of the kitchen from upstairs in the loft. You can see that the floor is real old, and also that the stove is real old. This was old when MDRS was built. It's a gas stove scavenged from an RV. We had a refrigerator to go along with it. That's now downstairs in the lab. We have a proper fridge now, but this one's got to go. It's a safety hazard, and it's a real pain to use. So that'll be gone this summer, and that follows the 2011 or 2009 edition of cabinets and the 2011 edition addition of a really nice artificial stone top here. These cabinets up here are full of all the kind of dehydrated food that folks eat out there. Including other improvements include upgrading of the fire and carbon monoxide sensors for crew safety, replacing and upgrading the webcam system, which all of you who like MDRS, you can Google MDRS webcam and go to the site that shows pictures taken every 3 minutes of the season as it unfolds. Now it's on summer hiatus, but we expect to have it up and working by the fall. And finally, upgrades to the data logging system that helps crews prepare their reports, or sometimes doesn't. And here's another shot of the tunnel to the observatory. So our plans for next season are many and varied. We are going to continue to tighten up documentation and training requirements as needed for safety. We're going to further systematize crew handovers with checklists. We'll expand the informational materials available to crews in advance of their missions, and also to Capcoms and the RST. Shannon has submitted a NASA research grant application for Mars science operations at the habitat. And of course, we'll continue to promote media coverage of MDRS as part of the Mars Society's overall program of outreach. So the upgrades to the HAL system are meant to avoid situations like this where everybody spends all evening working on reports. You can see how happy they look. Now, longer-term goals are also under consideration. Say we've got to save something for next year, right? So we will be including more field science, field engineering, and exploration operations projects, both by crews and by external researchers who come to us and would like to contact crews, communicate with crews, and involve crews in their research. We won't be doing much of that this year, but that's something to look at for next year. If you're interested in working with us on a multi-crew project, human factors project, a science ops project, and if you have access to an IRB to approve your human subjects research, you can come work with us. We want to recruit more field scientists and engineers. We're looking for new members for the remote science team and for the Capcoms. We are looking to upgrade MDRS energy self-sufficiency through solarization and energy economy through revisions to our insulation. We're looking to further upgrade the greenhouse facilities, institute regular outreach events in the area, and all of this will involve, as Cheryl said earlier, driving crew application and selection earlier in the season to allow us time to accomplish a proper research review. So if it was my birthday as MDRS management team member, what would I like to see? Okay. One would be an engineering team leader, somebody with experience at MDRS and the ability to pull together a team of scientists and engineers to work on engineering projects out there, particularly the habitat physical plant. So the MDRS has had a number of very talented engineering leads in the past, beginning with, what's his name, Frank, let's see, the most recent was Judd Reed, before him Josh Nelson, James Harris, and we need another person to join that distinguished lineage of MDRS crew engineers. And we also need engineering team members able to collaborate in a virtual team, design, build, consult, or travel to MDRS to implement things. We need additional Capcom volunteers, people who are reliable, diplomatic, and if you're multilingual, you speak some Spanish, some Japanese, some Russian, that would be great. And additional RST members, remote science team members in robotics, and a number of different sciences where we have projects, but we're underrepresented in expertise. So if you have any of these talents or trainings, contact me. And the next, let's see, this shows how to get in touch with us, and please do. So at this point, we are done with the presentation part and into the panel part. So I encourage you to ask questions of any of us or all of us, and we'll confer and figure out who's going to be able to answer your question best. Thank you. In front.
Have crew members brought musical instruments or radios, and if so, how did the rest of the crew react to the perhaps unexpected sounds?
Can you hear me? Okay. So I can answer that. One of my crew members, who was actually our crew biologist, fantastic guy by the name of Bashar Assad, brought an acoustical guitar, and he played that for us, and we actually had, he brought a harmonica, and we had our Peruvian team member, Aviv Roman Gonzalez, who also brought some sort of little flute that was native to some of the musical genres that they have there in Peru. And we loved it because it was a break from the stresses of being confined with very little stimulation from the external world. So the music was kind of something that brought us together. And we enjoyed it. And actually, Bashara recorded a cover song from, it was a David Bowie cover song. He sat in the green hat in what we call the Zen Garden, and we all made use of the Zen Garden quite frequently. Being from South Georgia and now a transplant to Houston, I actually appreciate the humidity. I don't do well in a very, very dry environment, and the Zen Garden was so hot. I mean, the temperatures would reach 110 degrees Fahrenheit in there. But we would go in there and we would exercise to the best that we could do. We made homemade kettlebells and things like that, but that's another story. But he went into the Zen Garden, he actually recorded an entire song, but we appreciated that, and we enjoyed it.
But did you know ahead that
Yes.
that would be there?
They asked the crew, they asked the rest of us, is it okay? We said sure.
I'm not sure it's going to be the same if someone wants to bring the bagpipes.
My other hat is as a social psychologist, and I'll tell you that in most cases, when people bring their own personal music and that type of thing, they usually bring ways to not have to share it with the group. You bring your iPod and you listen to it where nobody else has to participate in it if they don't wish to. But in general, people are so bored and deprived of that kind of stimulation that they're usually very open to people bringing musical instruments and playing them or those kinds of things. So it's a shared activity, and it usually goes over fairly well. But the trick here is to make sure that you ask before you start playing your bagpipes.
I'd like to add too that we brought a Dropbox full of music, and music was a big piece of our day. So we played music. Every time we were in the Have together, we played music. We needed that stimulation.
You, sir?
In addition to the specific research project that you have done there, you have a lot of experience in just how a hab like this runs. Do you have any plans to gather up just the lessons learned and how to run a hab in a remote area that might be useful to people who are designing moon bases or Mars bases?
Dr. Sheehan, yes, sir, and I can talk to you more about this at work sometime, but that's something that I actually talked with Dr. Hunter and Dr. Bishop as well as Dr. Rupert about. I think it would be fantastic, especially with some of the private companies that are starting to come online, Mars One being one. I believe they have plans for their own habitats, but also with High Seas. So High Seas is, I like the organization, but I think there's lessons to be learned from all the habitats. But MDRS has been around for a long time, and I really like the fidelity of the habitat itself. And I said this at the presentation at JSC as well. I like the test bed, and I really think that it's a very unique opportunity for us to get some good research out of it, including the lessons learned.
What's the average time the residents has it varied over the course of MDRS existence?
Okay, the average crew mission is a 2-week rotation. Although there have been rotations as short as 4 days, which was the World Space Week mission, which was kind of a one-off. For the past few days, the McLennan Community College people have done twin 1-week rotations in a 2-week framework. And there have been a couple of longer missions. One has been proposed for this coming season by Team Peru, who wants a whole month out there. I don't know the status of crew acceptance. That those choices will be issued by Dr. Rupert on, I think, the 15th of this month. But you can basically go as long as you like. Going back to high seas, we tried to get the Mars Desert Research Station for 4 months at once, and it fell through, but the organization was willing to do it, at least for a while.
What is the weight of the suit and helmet and backpack? Is it intended to simulate the weight of a real spacesuit on Mars, or is it lighter?
So I'm glad you brought that up. That's an area of particular interest for me. As an exercise physiologist at JSC, that's one of the things that I'm heavily involved with is EVA, task analysis, and research. This is just a simulation suit, so it's not a mock-up spacesuit. It consists, in total, I haven't weighed the suit. That was one thing that I plan to do if I'm accepted for another crew for this next field season, is to do an actual EVA task analysis where I collect various physiologic variables like metabolic cost of a task, heart rate, that sort of thing, and I'll also weigh the suit. So I want to know the differences in a person performing the task baseline or in shirt sleeve, they don't have the suit on, versus with the suit on, how does it affect performance? I don't have an answer in terms of how much the suit weighs. It's not very much. If I had to guess, with the backpack, the helmet, the coveralls, but you also have to take into account the person's boots. The boots can also change, and the gloves. Definitely less than 30 pounds, not more than that.
Are there plans to do experiments with a suit that would have the same weight on Earth that a spacesuit would have on Mars to see how much that degrades performance of the person having to carry that extra weight?
I can tell you that from an MDRS standpoint, currently, no. That would be something that would definitely be of interest. But there are a lot of suited trials that are currently in the planning phases at NASA and other organizations. High seas, and we keep referencing that, but that's also another good analog. They do have mock-up spacesuits. Now, Jean, you can clarify. I don't believe they're doing any sort of physiological research with those suits. Is that correct?
Not at the moment, no. It's mostly testing and sort of developmental testing for the suits, which is the proper stage at this point. And then North Dakota State has their suits and MIT has their suits. If you were interested in doing that kind of research, we'd be happy to talk to you about putting together a program for not the coming season, but the 2015, 2016, or later season.
CO2 accumulation in the helmet is something that I experienced for myself while out on EVA. And there's also not a lot of flexibility for a different range of sizes for the crew and for metric differences. So our little field, and she was a small female, our field scientist, it was really funny to watch her and to watch how just the proprioceptive acuity of the body changes once it's encapsulated in a suit, right? So she's used to getting down and really looking at the rocks, but in this suit, she now has this helmet on, so she bumped her faceplate against the rock a couple of times. It took her a while to get used to it, but she experienced quite a bit of difficulty just because of the configuration of the suit and because it only came in a one-size-fits-most configuration.
Yeah, we should just get the last question.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Tony?
I just wanted to comment on the making the spacesuit the same mass as we use on Mars. Remember, Mars has a 0.38 gravity, so the body itself would weigh less. So you need to know what the actual suit would weigh on Mars and then somehow adjust the simulated suit to make up the same mass sort of thing.
Right, well, what Tony said was that gravity on Mars is 0.38, which will affect the perceived weight of one's body as well as the suit. So the calculations are a little more complicated than you might suggest. Now, our session volunteer here says that we're all out of time for questions because people have to go to lunch before the plenary start again at 1 o'clock. But I'll be outside, we'll be outside in the hallway for a few minutes if you have any more questions.
And as science director, I want to say those are great ideas, and I expect to see an application and a full proposal.